Okay, I think we're good to go. Hi Charisse, how are you doing today? I'm gonna move this back and forth between us because we only have one.
Yeah.
Once I get another one, then you'll have one, I will have one, and we can
Okay.
just, it won't be an issue.
I'm doing well, thanks for asking.
Well, so the topic I want to talk about today is more, about your experience as a therapist and of course in your life dealing with grief and everything. So something I deal with a lot is some amount of, not now, but when I was younger at least, some amount of anger at my parents. Which, number one, is kind of shame comes with that, because you're not supposed to be angry with your parents, per se. And also, with me and my parents, there's a big divide, because we don't speak the same language, per se. But also, they are from a culture that doesn't really believe in individuality, per se. So, it took me a long time to become my own independent person, right? Not just feel like I'm living my life for them, per se. The thing that they find it hard to understand is, okay, we brought you to this country, we housed you, we helped you get an education. But the thing that I think was really missing was, for instance, my father was never really around from the ages of 1 to 8, because I lived in Korea and he lived in the U.S. But also, even when I was here, for instance, for I think 7 years, middle school and high school, he never actually once said, when I came home from school, said like, "Hey, how's your day? Who are your friends? What's going on?" Not just that, but we picked up and moved a lot.
In reference to his pastoral duties, correct?
Exactly. And when that happened, I worked at his church. So I see it as I gave him a lot of my time and everything. But also, this is something that, for instance, at church, I was being kind of abused by some of the older kids there. They would lock me in a room, they would be hurting me or whatever.
Was it because of your age or that you were the pastor's son?
I think it's just all of that. And, also like, I'm sure there was resentment because their lives are not so good anyway, so hurt people, right? One of the kids actually ended up committing suicide. So I'm sure he had a lot of pain that he was projecting on me or what have you. But it's one thing to get bullied, it's another thing to get bullied and then have your parents say, "Suck it up, we're going over to their house. And I'm gonna kiss up to your bully's parents. And you need to spend your evenings at this person's house." There's a lot of things like that. Also, when I went to college, I did everything on my own, So there was a sense of me of like, okay, I don't necessarily feel I owe my parents anything, but I still studied what they wanted me to study. I was very dutiful. I did everything they wanted me to do. I got this consulting job. I didn't love it. I quit. I started my own career in this culinary thing. I remember once my dad called me and he just started screaming at me. And that was the day I was kind of like, there's a lot of difficulties there. Okay, now that's how I thought about it when I was younger. And this is what I wanted to talk to you about more. As I get older, I'm not so much concerned about him as much as, I recognize a lot of the traumas in his life and the way he's passing those things down. And also his father wasn't really around. So maybe that's where he learned, or maybe that's where his perception that fathers don't really need to be around came from. But it's more just me going through this grieving process of my own loss of childhood, my own loss of what have you, which you talked about a little bit yourself because you had to take care of your own family at a young age. I'm sure you had to grieve on some level for yourself, the loss of yourself. And, because this is, even though we're publicizing it, this is a little bit of a therapy for me too. I really want to talk to you about this and say, okay, there are days where I'm at work or something and like there are thoughts that enter my head, negative thoughts that I don't want to think about. I don't want to waste any more time having any sort of resentment at my parents or whatever. I just want to move on. And there's a lot I want to accomplish with my life. And now I'm very focused on my career.
This is hot.
Yeah, and I just don't want this thing to get in the way anymore.
First of all, our feelings and emotions are called to actions.
Sorry, could I mind you just hold it?
No, sure. Our feelings and emotions are called to actions, which is something you seldom to ever hear. And in terms of things being replayed, I like how the scripture refers to it as be angry, but one, don't sin in your anger. And the scripture reference for that, I believe, is Ephesians 4:26. Ephesians 4:26 acknowledges, yes, you'll be angry because it says, okay.
What's the verse again?
Ephesians 4:26.
Okay.
It says, be angry, but don't sin in your anger. And it goes on to say, don't let the sun go down on your anger, because you'll be giving the devil a place. There's a lot of things that could be unpacked there and applies to. One, sin in, be angry. Because if you read the same scriptures, God was angry at the children of Israel, and look how he stood up, defended his children, but stood up to their enemies. But now to give to the application of don't sin in your anger, don't let the sun go down on your anger. When the sun goes down on it, you have time to let it fester, for you to do that replay, that repeat. Oh, I should have done this, I should have said that. Well, how about I do this if it happens the next time? And you begin to store up animosity.
You said don't let the sun set on your anger.
Yes, don't let the sun go down on your anger.
What do you mean by that?
Okay, when things are in the daylight and illuminated on the light, there's no place for them to hide. They have to be confronted. They're in plain view.
I see. Yeah.
But when the sun goes down, it's hidden. And it gets deep, deep inside of us. And it comes up at those inopportune times, whether you're cooking, you're in school, sometimes even being intimate with your mate, again, at the most inopportune times. And it's like, damn, just when you thought you dealt with it, you didn't.
Absolutely.
But yet, here it is again knocking at your door. So again, that is a call to action to get at the root, to really unpick and unpack why you're still feeling that way. And even if you can't have the conversation with your parents due to language barrier and even a cultural barrier, and then a belief system, what do? You could journal it. You could write them a letter on what you would like to say, including anything and everything you would like to say to them face to face, but you cannot. You could even use the empty chair technique.
That's
mom and dad,
Right.
envision that, visually imagine that they're sitting there and this is what you would like to say. And I dare say you could do a role play with the therapist, a close friend of yours, and even if you want to make a script that you could follow. But these are techniques that you should certainly engage in that would help you get at the root and set you free. So when those thoughts do come in, you have the right to say, hold it right there. I dealt with this. I recognize this is a trigger. Hearing this song, maybe even a particular scent or an aroma brings you back to that unpleasant place. But if you nip it in the bud, you confront it and nip it in the bud right there, guarantee you it would not. The occurrences of remembrance will be decreased to the point where they cease.
And you basically meaning, because in so many ways it is already deep inside me, you're saying
it's like your soul is wounded.
You still need to confront it. You still need to somehow deal with it. You can't just hold on to it.
Yes.
Right.
And forgiveness is a big part of that. Forgiving your parents. And as you said, what if it is a generational thing? your grandfather to your father who's trying to put that same onus on you.
Right, right.
It has to stop. And that is a form of insanity to me. Doing the same exact thing and expecting a different outcome.
Absolutely.
That is not going to happen.
Right.
No.
Well, you mentioned forgiveness, and something that I've really come to terms with is not expecting them to change. Because a lot of times you kind of want them to change, or you want them to see their point of view, or my point of view. It's just not going to happen. But at least I don't have to give them the power of that. So me just accepting them as people and respecting just how they are. And even if we don't see eye to eye on anything, be okay with that. And on a lot of levels, I do forgive them about everything. I still don't want to spend time with them. And they see it as, oh, he's holding on to all this stuff that happened to him or whatever, and then he's retaliating. It's not that at all. It's really actually very simple in that they're not hospitable. Meaning, something that so at work at Chick-fil-A, one of my managers told me an amazing story about how when he was 23, he was a young pastor in the South. And the men's prayer group there, the deacon who's leading that prayer group, was a big, fat, huge man who was very charismatic. Everyone loved him. And
This sounds like me.
and he had two big loves in his life, or two big interests. One was with vacuum cleaners, for whatever reason. Loved fixing them, loved collecting them. The other one was a Southern breakfast. So he said, oh, let's put this and so he said, let's bring the men's prayer breakfast back. So all these guys get together and they're cooking up sausage and biscuits and gravy and sweet tea, and they put him, my manager, in charge of the grits. He never made grits in his life. He screwed it up. So when they serve it, it's like eating sand water. They're not cooked at all. Horrible. He's looking around at the table, nobody's touching their grits, except the deacon. He's grimacing it, but he keeps eating it. And one of the other guys finally tell him, hey man, you don't need to eat that. And he goes, oh, thank God, and pushes it away. So after the breakfast, he said, hey, those grits were not good. Why did you keep eating them? And he said, I just wanted to make somebody new feel welcome. And he told that story to us as an example of what hospitality means and how we should think about hospitality in this business. But also kind of goes down to, okay, I really value people who are conscientious and aware of others and tries to make other people comfortable. My parents, especially my father, it's this kind of thing where we're the parents, you're the kid, it's your job to do the labor for us. Make me feel comfortable, make me, I'm doing a lot of that when I'm around them. And also, every single one of my birthdays, I spent 3 hours listening to his sermons, and every Christmas listen to his sermons, every Sunday listen to his sermons, and whatever. And, I gave him so much of my time, but even when I'm there, he doesn't cook, he doesn't clean. We do all of that for him. And it's that piece. If I'm working all year and I get a 1-week vacation and I go spend time with them, I'm not on vacation. I'm still working for them. And that's something that I wish they would understand, is not that that I'm trying to retaliate or anything like that. It's I need my rest. And I don't feel comfortable around you because you don't make people feel comfortable. That's why your churches were never very successful, right? Because the biggest church he ever had was 25, 30 people. And he thinks about it differently. He thinks churches are here and businesses is here. When it's really all the same thing. In a lot of ways, you still need to pay rent, you still have staff, you still have to, you're still serving this product to people. Thinking about it in a business way, to me, isn't a cynical thing. It's a reality thing, because everything's a business. Even if you're not in it to make money, you're in it to get something out of it, and you need to organize people, blah, blah, blah. And also, he was very abusive to me, like I said. And there's a part of me that's still scared of him. And it doesn't take a genius to see that. But for him, yes, because he was never socialized properly. He never really had many friends. But he fails to understand that, like, when I'm around you, I don't feel comfortable around you. And that is a problem for me. But that's the first part of it. The second part about it is now I wondered why all these things have happened to me. But God is kind of showing me that my path is becoming clearer and clearer and clearer. Now that I'm in this job, a big part of my job is to almost be like a therapist at work, because people in this business tend to be damaged, or if they're doing well, they would not be working.
People are damaged.
People are damaged. You're right. And I need to talk them through a lot of stuff all the time. And that's another thing is I want to learn from you. And I'm sure you've had those moments where you've been in the kitchen, you're working, sweating, stressed, and the whole time in the back of your head, you're also thinking about something in your life that's really like bugging you too, right? If you, as a manager, let's say you had a manager, what could this person say to you or behave to you in a way that you think would help you at your job and feel more like better about everything?
Well, that they would be personable. Would walk in regardless as to what my shift was, if it was an AM or PM or maybe overnight or a PM into it overnight, whatever. Is good evening, good morning, how are you today?
Right.
Pleasantness, respect, regard, and genuine interest. That's very disarming. And that automatically is going to bring down those facades. It's going to start to soften those walls that we have erected. But I want to roll it back to your dad.
Okay.
As a pastor who should know the word, going in and out, or backwards and forward. Our earthly fathers are to be, I guess, a prototype of God our Father.
Right.
And when they're not, especially, because see, judgment begins first at the house of God, his church, his children, his bride. And I dare say your father dropped the ball with that. So his task was also to reconcile his culture. That men are the dominant ones. Right. Men it's a patriarchal society, patriarchal culture. Yep. To reconcile his culture with what the Word of God says. And if it doesn't agree with the Word of God, then he had to do away with that.
You hit the nail on the head.
That's all it is. That's what it is.
And I had this argument with my mom sometimes, because when it comes to culture and the Word of God, culture always wins for them. You know, my father always says, I don't want to be a pastor, but my father told me to be a pastor, that's why I'm a pastor, and that's what we do. Okay, but then you're not listening to the Word of God, right? You're not being
the disobedience.
Right, you're not being sensitive to what he might be telling you with the world around you and the people around you and everything around you. You're not listening, right? You're kind of just going by culture. And that clash, I mean, you hit the nail on the head.
And he's exalting the culture above God and putting him on the throne where God should be. That's a very, very slippery slope.
Absolutely. Now, me as his son, again, there's this myth of the son saving the father, like in the Pinocchio stories, like the guy swallowed up.
I've been giving some thought about that.
Right. And, sometimes I don't know, it's very hard for me, right? And I'm asking you, like, how can I be at peace? Because I also know that people who don't have some problems with their parents and they pass away and they don't resolve it, comes back from the grave. It doesn't go away just because they passed away. And that's what I'm afraid of.
Your best bet would be to, and I wouldn't say Pinocchio, but I was thinking something along the lines is to father him in the way in which he needed his father to father him. And in that way, you would be empowering him to, you know what, my parents, they're not perfect. And to help him realize their shortcomings, that they are just flesh and blood. And begin to seek God to deal with his insecurities, to deal with his wounds. And I'm more than sure that he's battles within himself, the word of God versus what he wanted to do. Because whether you're a pastor or not, the Bible makes it clear. Thinking about Hannah, God loans our children to us. They are not our property, as much as we act as if they are, but they're just a loan. And are we being good stewards over what God has loaned us? Are we being piss poor stewards? And if we're piss poor stewards, that's when our children develop in mental, emotional issues, psychological issues, and just a whole lot of bad baggage that's unnecessary.
And this is for the viewers. I do want to let's take it a little bit step back, because I want people who aren't Christian watching this, who might still have parental problems, for this to help them still. And I think a lot of what you said is just like therapeutic, human psychology stuff anyway. But if we even, I think if you are uncomfortable with the idea of, let's say, there being a God, I think somebody could still see it as well. A child who watches Spider-Man for the first time, it doesn't take much for him to recognize instantly who's good and who's bad and who he should be relating to. A little girl playing house with her dolls, she's not imitating her mother. She's actually getting an understanding of what motherness is, the concept of motherness per se, or at least that's what I've read in like a developmental podcast. Meaning, there was something infinite before this child and after this child. And that infinity is God, because it's not like this child is born and we're teaching this child everything. They come into it with God inside of them, and that's also something that took me a long time to really come to grasp with or understand. That I am my own person, that God made me for a purpose, and trying not to go down that path of just following my culture and my parents, because that's what I've been told I should do. And I think, I think to me that's where I'm starting to break, at least from the cycle of my father. I'm not doing what he wanted me to do. And God has rewarded me for following his path, what he wanted me, what he had for me, has set aside for me. And this is all going back to the fact that, me in my position, having gone through everything that I have gone through, I'm sorry, I guess it's my turn to hold this. Having gone through everything that I should have gone through, I couldn't do my job if I hadn't done that. I couldn't do my job at work with these younger people now.
I believe you.
If I don't relate to them. And not only do I relate to them in the sense of I used to struggle with money and I'm doing better for myself, and that's also possible for you. But also I dealt with a lot of the traumas that you have. I've been abused as a kid and I've healed a lot from it. Personally, I'm in a pretty good place. I used to be very depressed, low self-esteem, not narcissistic, but nihilistic.
Yeah, I remember.
And like you said,
can relate. I remember many years ago, I attempted to commit suicide.
Wow.
And I don't want to be crass and certainly offend anybody who has lost a loved one to suicide. But my experience, now that I'm on the other side, suicide and what drives us to suicide is very myopic. That's all we see.
Right.
We cannot see anything around that,
Right.
underneath it,
Right.
over it. That's all we see.
Right.
The issues that are driving us to that level of depression and despondency that it results in suicide. Me, Charisse, Lucille, soon to be Rojas, can say that suicide is really overrated. It is a permanent solution to a temporary problem.
Right.
My experience has ministered to a lot of people who were teetering on suicide. And I've asked some people, but why would you want to do that for? If you were to put your desires and your interests on a scale with the weight of suicide on the other, in the other bin,
Right.
what would weigh out?
Right. Right.
Wouldn't suicide fall all the way down?
Right.
And your plans, your desires, your aspiration, your loves, your passions would be way up.
And you know what? I think in a lot of ways you're also being a bad person because you're being a murderer. And you're saying, oh, well, I'm not murdering. I'm just saying, well, you're kind of murdering yourself.
Exactly. And when the Bible says, thou shalt not kill, that includes taking your life.
Right. Right.
Because murder is murder. Murder is simply taking the life of another human being.
Right. Right.
There's no parameters on whose life. It's just don't take anybody's life.
Well, it's so interesting that you bring that up. I think that's something we don't talk about because I think many people have suicidal thoughts. And we're ashamed to even talk about it.
Because of that. It's considered unspeakable.
Right.
And when you look up the word unspeakable, it's obvious. It means the unutterable. Just it's so bad we can't even speak on it. But how do people get free?
Right.
How do people really understand that they make a choice, that there's always going to be a choice before them to choose life or to choose death? But that choice is always going to be before them.
And you know what? And it's and because you've come victorious on the other side of it, I think that was God's will, right? For you.
Definitely.
Because now you're able to heal other people, and I'm so grateful that God brought us together because
So am I.
this is something we're two very different people from very different walks, like everything. But at the same time,
we have more commonalities.
But also a lot of commonalities,
We're discovering,
right?
yes.
But also, it now is an opportunity for you to pass down your wisdom, not just to me, but to put it out into the world. And, I want to continue that work that you're doing. And again, the older I get, the more I'm seeing the path in my life lay out. And in my 20s, it was all fuzzy, it was confusion. Now I'm starting to see it. The fog is starting to clear a little bit for me. Where I want to take everything you're doing to the next level is to bring it into the business world, especially into blue-collar work. Because there are volumes and libraries written about management, science, but this is all focused on white-collar jobs. And at the end of the day, those jobs are somewhat easy to manage because when you have millions of dollars to throw around, it really just comes down to money. You pay this person this much, vest the stock, 5 years,
Go to
bonus,
sleep.
performance.
Wake up, passive income and stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
With hourly workers, not only do you not have that tool, but actually in a lot of ways, our hands are tied because, to be honest with you, the government, right? Because, as you know,
corrupt.
Well, exactly. But as you know, in any kitchen, any workplace, there's always going to be those 4 or 5 soldiers who run everything, right? They're 50% more productive than anybody else. They should be getting 50% more of the pay. They should be getting $22 an hour. It's really hard to do that when walking in the door, a high school kid is getting paid close to $22 an hour because of the minimum wage and at that size you need to also do the health benefits and payroll tax and all this stuff. Now, I look at it as on some ways, maybe as business managers, we deserve that on some level because the government has given us that freedom and they exploited it. And that's why they had to put in this rule. But I think about it and I say, what a shame, because if we had good people in place, they could have really used this to empower people and say, oh, you're walking in the door, $10 an hour, you've been here for 2 years, you do everything, $22 an hour. Like, we don't have the power of that as managers anymore. The government decided to take that away from us because, well, like you said, they're corrupt, but also maybe business managers.
Myself, and I.
Exactly.
Us four, no more. You know,
Right,
that's
right.
what that comes. Well, the government encourages that kind of thing. But now you do have some companies out there, and I think Chick-fil-A is one of them. Don't hold me to it, but that is 100% employee invested.
Yes. And so here's what Chick-fil-A does that makes them very ethical. One, they're openly Christian. That actually does quite help.
It does.
And there's a level of integrity there that is just apparent. But also they made it so that this company is never going to go public. So if you're one of these kind of like yuppie people, which ironically tend to be more like socialist anyway, what they like to do is they like to go into companies, load them up with debt, take them public, get a huge payout, bounce. 10 years later, the company's dying.
That's right.
And the staff
because they
is
sucked everything out of it.
sucked everything out of it, and the staff is straining under the weight of that debt. That's never gonna happen with Chick-fil-A. So, if you're one of those like greedy, predatory like executives, you're not gonna go to that company because there's no payout there for you.
That's correct.
So that's one part of it. Another part of it is that it is one of the few companies that really do promote this socioeconomic mobility. Meaning, the owner of my location started on the counter as an hourly worker. Now he owns the place and he makes $500,000 a year. Not a lot of companies do that anymore. And that being said, it's still hard to motivate people, and that's why I brought this up to you, because the more I'm learning my position, the more I'm learning that my only weapon, like you said, is to be there for them, to be personal to them, to mentor them, to help them with their trauma, and then to show them the things that I learned, that I got out of it, and to also give them hope. This is just monotonous labor. But like the parable of the bricklayers, we're gonna try and give it some higher meaning to it. You know, like
I do.
And bouncing off what you're saying, this is what I'm starting to see as the goal, the legacy I want to leave, the path of my life. Bringing everything, your wisdom, your way of dealing people and healing people, bringing it into the workplace, into a restaurant environment where, in a lot of ways, is the only place where these people can have access to it. Because they're not going to go see a therapist on their day off. They're not going to go heal. I'm their boss. A lot of these people don't even have close people, friends. Like, I'm the support system.
And you know, when you talk about blue collar workers, a support system really is not there. And many of them, there's a big difference between permission and forgiveness. And with that said, I think about one of Tyler Perry's Medea movies, and it was the little girl who she was really struggling with math, and I forget how she came to be on Medea's roof. But the bottom line is, Medea, of course, wailed her out, but then had compassion on her and really reached out to her nephew Brian, whose daughter helped the other young girl excel in math and stuff, and really got her studies together. And throughout the movie, one part of the movie, the little girl told Medea, well, she let her in by saying this: well, I was always told I would always only be able to make money on my back.
Wow.
And that was prolific to me in the sense that people really need permission to do things differently, to do new things, to do uncharted things, unprecedented things, other than what they have seen in the environment. Victims of their culture, of their environment, of even their immediate families and extended families. You can do this. You can do something different. And that's the difference between permission and forgiveness. I'm not gonna ask forgive. I think about in my household, my mother, she never pushed education. I'm the first line. I'm the only one of my siblings to have a master's degree. I push education. And if my parents were alive, I would ask them for forgiveness for pushing myself to excellence, but certainly not their permission. Because God put this mandate on my life. And it kind of like your folks. Am I going to listen to my parents? Or am I going to go with God? And in terms of disobedience, he likens disobedience to witchcraft. That's how serious God is about obeying him. And the consequence of disobedience, he likens to witchcraft. So that's why I had that in mind when I said, pray for your parents and ask God to arrest them by the power of his Holy Spirit. That he'll teach them his way. And I'm sure your dad is bitter too, that he didn't pursue his dreams.
Absolutely.
Because of the fear of his father.
Yeah.
But at what point in time does he stand up for himself? And patriarchal societies, cultures, ideology, that is in stark contrast to God's perspective of egalitarian society where men and women are equal. That's what the word says. I'm just, I didn't write it, I'm telling you what it says. And anything that exalts itself against that is not cool.
Well, I'm wondering about this. Have you ever had to deal with a client that will come to you, let's say, in a way, like they've been pushed towards it or whatever, like they have a hard time opening up to you. And you need to know about them to help them, but they're not telling you anything. I have a lot of people like that at work. Not a lot, but like two of the managers, two of the staff shift leads in particular. One of them has been particularly very nasty to me. And I get it because she's been there for like a year or something like that. And here some random Asian guy comes in and they put her above her. And they're like, who is this guy in charge? Whatever, right? And I'm trying to win her over. Hey, I'm here for you. I'm trying to help you. And I just want not just your job to be easier and for people to not like call out and act irresponsibly, but also, like you said, to be a support system for you. And I know a lot of stuff, whatever you're dealing with, I can probably some ways provide something for a little bit, right? I mean, 23, 24-year-old, I've seen a lot more than this younger woman, right? What are some strategies that you've used to kind of approach people that are so full of resentment and, like you said, on some ways a little bit myopic, like they don't want to go out of there?
But they're afraid sometimes. They don't know that they can. It's like, especially in the inner city, in the hoods, as people refer to them as, you're fenced in. Look at
Absolutely.
at the structure and the design of New York City housing developments with everything inside. Everybody's contained, so it's really you're in a 2x2 cell.
Yep.
And getting past that, I understand, is a big thing. And it starts with, as I said previously, good afternoon, good morning, how are you? You look lovely today. Oh, and no disrespect, because you wouldn't want her to feel as if you're coming onto her and you're invading her space. But, did you change your hair, whatever? Or how was your commute home last night? Or how was your travel in today? Things like that. And at the same time, if she is suspicious of you, you just honor that her need to process your intention. And that's almost becomes sacred in the sense that it's silence. And silence speaks volumes, believe it or not.
Absolutely.
Because that's where the body language comes in. That's where the eye connection, is she looking you in your eye? Is she sizing you up and down? And it's gonna have it's definitely gonna be displayed in her job performance. Is it getting better? If, for instance, if she has a lateness problem, is she coming to work on time? How personable are you in me coming down and meeting her where she is? And I'm not necessarily saying that you have to come down because we don't know where she is, but certainly make yourself available to her. Communicate that she can trust you, that you are here for her. Because I've had a few hostile clients. And outside of, oh, it's good afternoon or good evening, how are you? As I said, how was your commute in? If you drove, how was traffic? Did you were able to find the parking? Stuff like that. You know, and we just sit there.
Well, you know, and I'm somebody who, I mean, I've gone not just weeks but months off payroll from this place trying to pay my staff. I want to communicate to them that I genuinely care, and that for me it's not so much about anything but that. Like I get that's where everything, all my benefit comes from. It makes me very happy once I have a crew set up that is like working together, everyone's happy. That's really what I'm trying to achieve. And it's also really hard for me to sometimes break that barrier. I'm wondering, you know, candidly speaking, like, is there a reaction as like a black blue collar worker being approached by an Asian guy like myself sometimes? Because I am also sensitive about that. Sometimes I'm like, I'm not black or Latino, and everybody is black and Latino there, and I'm always a little bit feel like the outsider. Even with white people, white collar work. I mean, I'm always struggling with that as a big part of my life.
I can relate to that because I'm gonna honorary everything. And that's why when you were describing the heavyset gentleman, I said, oh, it sounds like you're describing me. I've been made an honorary Jew, an honorary Russian, honorary Asian, you know, so many honorary ethnic groups that I am what I am because I'm first a human being before I'm black, I'm Spaniard, whatever what I am. I'm a human being first. And then I'm a woman, you know. But in terms of your team, maybe you could take the team out.
Yeah.
Invite them out to something social.
Right. You
know, find out what they'd like to do.
I was thinking one thing I would love to do is just to bring in a big pot of curry and rice and bring in lunch one day. Here we go.
Break the ice.
Break the ice.
Food is always going to be, what do they say?
Absolutely, right?
Yeah.
Food has this amazing thing, right?
It really does. Food and music, this universal. Yes. You absolutely cannot go wrong with that. And you'd be surprised. What, you know, if you, let's say, do they play music at the restaurant?
A little bit.
Okay.
Actually, what our prep cook downstairs is like a Caribbean woman actually from this neighborhood, and she's always playing gospel music down there, so that's really nice.
Okay.
Upstairs, they like to, it's like younger kids, so they like to play like the rap music or whatever. I like the gospel music a little more. So
okay.
More relaxing.
Well, the reason why I ask is maybe everybody will have a day.
Yeah.
You know, let's hear what's playing on your, I don't know, iPod or whatever. You know, why don't we do that?
And I think
because it's including, it would be inclusive.
Right. And I guess, you know, something that I'm having trouble with is getting past that first barrier. Because we are at work. And it is a little hard for me to, like, we just don't have the time. We just sit down and, like, get to know you and whatever. I'm trying to get to know you as we go along. But at the same time, if I don't know anything about you per se, or you're not opening up to me, the woman I was telling you about before, she just like she looks at me like one word answers, or just very quick to like, you know, criticize or say, well, I don't do it like that, or whatever. And she's a very good employee. You know what I'm saying?
A good work ethic.
Yeah. There's nothing wrong with her work ethic. It's just of me thinking as a manager, and even thinking about this as a case study, because I know this is going to happen over and over again. You know, how can I reach this person? You know, what strategies? And I almost want to take like one of the classes you've taken, or a therapy class at some point, because they're giving me like $250 credit to take any class I want. I just want to really get good at trying to break the ice and get to know them. And one of the directors there, his name is Matt, the guy I was talking to you about, who was a young pastor. He has that magic vibe. People just open up to him. People come talk to him. He can just, including myself, you know, he just can put the wall down. And that's really what I would love to learn to do or get better at, right? And I'm gonna try that. You know, I do already kind of say good morning, whatever, but there's always a point where the conversation just kind of hits a brick wall. And I don't know really how to keep going. I say, hey, how's it going? Good morning. Hey, how's your commute? Fine. All right. Well, you know, what do you got going on today? You know, like, you need help with anything? It's like, nah, whatever. I'm like, all right, see. Whatever.
Well, you know, you could compliment her on something too, because like you said, she has a very strong work ethic. And, you know, I noticed that whatever task she has, let's say, that you're really up on it and you're ahead. Could you give me your inside tip on how to run your station?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right. And I did try to, you know, the other day I was leaving work, and I just kind of like put it out there. I was like, hey, you know, why do you hate me so much? What's going on? And she started laughing. She's like, I don't hate you, like, whatever. Why would I hate you?
Well, that's intimidating.
Yeah.
Especially if she's never been counted as what her opinion and her feelings and observations that they matter.
Exactly.
So that was not a good approach, if that makes any sense.
I see what you're saying, yeah.
You know, because even when it comes to raising our children, and if we don't raise our children, somebody or something else will.
Wow.
And I think about from the time children are young, and I think we briefly maybe touched upon this the first podcast, is self-autonomy.
I got it.
And advocacy, how important that is. Because there's always going to be a friend or relative that one or two children won't like. But yet the parents, go and kiss Aunt Susie or Uncle Bill or, you know, whatever. And then as things go down, as the child grows up and stuff, more often than not, that friend or relative that they shied away from and we forced them upon our children, they wind up molesting them. Sometimes killing them even.
Right.
So that's another reason why we have to see our children on loan to us, that we are to be stewards over them, to raise them in a healthy and a responsible fashion, to stand up for themselves, and not disrespectfully, but again, to be able to stand up for themselves. Self-purchase is very, very important. Because I think about somebody very dear to me, how easily manipulated she was. And she would tell me, when we would hang out, she would tell me, you're gruff. Why would you, if someone would be checking me out, I wasn't born this size, obviously, you know, and being disrespectful with their eyes. And my response would be, do I owe you money? Did I sleep with you last night, or you have a problem? And just come at them. And she could not do that. She definitely shocks them at first, but let's just nip this in the bud right here and now. What is it that you want?
You know, you said something very interesting, and, you know, I think this is the last thing we can kind of cover. Okay. I'll leave it with this because I think this will kind of bring it full circle. You said something very interesting about how you can't really force anyone to start to get to know you, and if there is some animosity there, it's probably for good reason. And I don't blame her for not warming up to some of the directors, which is my position. That's our fault. So far, it seems like the directors they brought in were more white collar. They're hesitant to get down and dirty with them. They don't necessarily have the operational thing. I mean, I'm a beast in there, but I've done both, right? But I'm willing to admit it's very hard to find a person like myself who has an economics degree from NYU, who has a white collar background, and also has done this both. So I can't really fault them for not finding necessarily those people, but like I get it. The previous directors must have screwed up for her to have that animosity. So
it doesn't necessarily have to have come from Chick-fil-A.
Right.
She could have brought that with her.
Baggage, right.
She could have definitely brought that baggage. Because I think about someone like myself. Hey, I know what it's like to be on both sides of the welfare desk. I know what it's like to be homeless. I know what it's like to do coke lines next to a bona fide princess. So I know what it's like. Both sides of the spectrum and then in the middle.
Right. And
that's why meeting people where they are, finding that commonality is so very important. And even an icebreaker.
Right.
Maybe you could do an icebreaker with Teddy.
Well, let me ask you this, because something that I have not grown out of, that's so very instilled in me, is this idea of like accomplishments equals love, right? As in, when I was a kid, I was only given love when I got A's at school. I was only given love when I did the things my parents wanted me to do. That subconsciously gave me the drive to even come this far. I have a chip on my shoulder. I was the kid that didn't speak English. I was like the little chubby kid. I was always a little more effeminate as a kid. I cried easily even though I was a boy. And that chip on my shoulder and my innate competitiveness, I played football for 7 years, is what led me to even do something crazy like build this restaurant or go to this crazy school with all these other rich white kids or what have you, right? So yeah, there's a pro to that, but a con to that is I approach every situation of like, okay, now I gotta flex on my accomplishments to get love. Sometimes it does work. Sometimes I thought, I used to own my restaurant before this. Some of the staff are like, oh shit, like this guy's impressive. Not always gonna work. Like with her, for instance. And I want to get good at showing. I want to ask you: is it like how can I be vulnerable, but not lose respect? What are some ways that you can gain respect? Because I think I'm wrong about that, right? I don't think everybody actually just gives you respect for having accomplishments. I think like there's a lot of people that has respect, that get respect. Not necessarily they're super accomplished, and I see that.
Just be who you are. That's the best, because people know when you're authentic or not. Just be who you are.
You're right.
That's what we respond to, authenticity. Because I can see the bullshit from a mile away. I'm not. And
that's so true.
Don't even come here with that.
Right. That's great advice.
And that's what it is. Just be who you are.
Be yourself. Be honest.
That's it. Because we respond to honesty, and there's spirit talk. And the spirit is going to be a witness. And even because man is trifold, we're spirit, soul, and body.
Yeah.
So even if you don't have, I don't like the word religion, but if you don't have a relationship with your creator, there's still spirit talk. And people know when you're shooting from the hip or when you're feeding them some nonsense.
Right.
Because I think about myself and, you know some of my accolades, and I've been called stupid, I've been called all kind of things, and I just laughed at myself thinking, if only you knew. But whose loss is that? Certainly not mine.
And you know what? Just be yourself is simple but profound, right? Because how can you know yourself? Knowing yourself is the first thing, and knowing why, God's intense with you and the things that knowing God is knowing yourself in some ways, right?
Yes.
And
our spirit part of us anyway.
Exactly. And if you don't have that, I think it is so easy to not have that center, that identity? And how can you be yourself if you don't have a self? And I think that's when we can turn to dangerous things like quote-unquote narcissism, where you're obsessed with the validation of others and you're constantly morphing yourself. But inside, there's really is more. It's not solid inside. Yeah.
Or what you see when you look inside yourself, you don't like.
Right.
Because more often than not, it's because
That's
you're not
amazing.
being true to yourself.
Yes.
You're being true to what somebody else wanted you to be.
Right.
Think about that.
Yeah.
I think about the animosity that has been created between my siblings and myself because I always walk to the beat of a different drum. Maybe I even built my own, but had it not been for me thinking outside of the box, I would not have had the experiences that I've had and would not be able to meet so many people where they are. And just keeping it real. That's it. Right.
Well, I guess, one last thing before we leave,
Okay.
everything we talked about, putting it into practice. I guess patience is a virtue. I should just be myself and be patient with her and not try to force myself on her. Let it happen naturally. And I think as long as I'm around, and I always, when I'm in there, I will also try to set an example. So I'm always like, if I want someone to work hard, I gotta work twice as hard. If I don't want someone to late, I can never be late.
But you know what?
Yeah.
Life happens.
Yeah.
And sometimes you're gonna be late. We can strive for excellence. We could strive for perfection. But perfection can never be obtained by mere man. God is the only perfect one. And that's a false narrative, that's an unhealthy projection when we strive for that and we demand other people to strive for excellence.
Right.
That's do the best that you could do. And it's interesting because I'm sure you've seen the Hallmark cards. Where I think it's the little girl, she's trying out for some kind of ice skating competition and the mother gives her 2 cards. A card that says I love you if you win and a card that says I love you if you don't. I've always done that with my kids.
Wow.
I love them the same if you brought that home an F, but I know you worked hard for that F because I would watch you study. We would study, we would do homework together, I would test you. So, and what's the same? What's the difference? Love should never be predicated, and respect and regard should never be predicated on somebody's accomplishments.
Wow. Yeah.
Why do you think suicide is so high among some cultures?
Very high in my culture.
Because culturally, the reality that life fails people is not allowed. It's always the person failed life. That is untrue, and it's very unhealthy. That drives people to self-medicate, to use substances, but oftentimes cuts their life short because that is unrealistic, false narrative. We don't feel life, life fails us.
Well, thank you so much for everything.
You're welcome.
I'm going to meditate on everything we talked about. When I edit these things, I always watch it 1 through anyway.
We covered a lot today.
Covered a lot. I said 30, 40 minutes.
I'm sorry.
It ended up being an hour anyway.
Over,
Well, it's not your fault. It's my fault too. I get into it when I talk about things with you. I think a big homework that I'm gonna work on is, again, as much as I'm saying I'm better, and I am. I love myself more than ever. Still got something that I really need to work on.
Heck, I'm still on the renovation.
Right. And that's definitely something that I definitely want to work on. And there are people who walk into a room and their attitude is like, I can't wait for people to find out about me. And I'm always still like, okay, everybody's going to not like me and I got to work my way up. And if I come with that energy, that's how they're going to receive me.
Exactly. You're going to attract what you put out. You're going to attract what you are. You're going to attract how you see yourself. And one of the things my mother could not stand me for was, and she told me this more times than a little bit, I could walk into a room filled with as many people or as few people as whatever, And if I wanted to, every head would turn and look at me. But if I walked into that same room and didn't want to be noticed, I would. She hated that I could turn my charm on and off. And I guess I am charming. I don't know. Am I? I've been told I am. I don't see myself as
absolutely.
that.
Well, I think
I just see myself as who I am.
Absolutely. Well, I think that's one of God's gifts.
I guess.
Right?
I just laugh. You know, the Dr. McQueen, he's my mentor. I love him. He refers to me as his sanguine. I'm like, okay. All right, if you say so.
Well,
you know.
there are people like you, even I've seen in life. And it's something I've always thought, like, how can I get some of that? Because I know I think maybe I do a little bit. As the older I get, I'm learning to be charming. But when I was a kid, even in high school, I used to look at the popular kids and almost be like, okay, what is it that they're doing that I'm not doing? Something like that. Just meditating on it, But it's a big.
I would never consider myself popular.
Yeah.
Because I've always been who I am, so I don't know about popularity, but okay.
That's true, right? Also, just being yourself.
Yeah.
And sometimes that is a feedback loop, right? I don't really care what people think about me. That spreads authenticity, and whether you want it or not, that will make you popular.
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah.
But with the coworker, the challenging one, maybe you'll give her a note affirming her.
That's a great idea. This
is why I love sleep. Coming up with different strategies and tactics to help my clients. Just a little note, put at her station or something of affirming her, that's all.
That is genius. And again, this is why I feel like I have so much to learn from you. And I think these are the little things that can have profound effects that we don't talk about. One more thing I want to say, I was listening to the congresswoman, or I think the senator from Hawaii. She ran for president, Tulsi Gabbard. She was an ex-soldier, whatever. She's one of those people that's more in the center. She can work with both sides of the aisle.
Okay.
Her parents own a what do they call it? It's like those. It's like a nut, starts with the M, macaron nuts or something.
Oh, macaroons?
No. It sounds like macaroon or similar, but it's like a nut from Hawaii specifically. They're a little bit fancy, right? And they're white, really nice flavor.
Yeah.
And her parents has this business where they turn those nuts into these little cookies. And when she first got elected, she sent these boxes to the bunch of Republicans with a little note. Macadamia nuts.
I made crust out of them,
Oh yeah?
Yeah.
And
pies and stuff.
And she said that one act has helped my career so much. And people will warm up to me. And it's also made me very valuable with Democrats, because I'm one of the few people that can stand out and say, can you win over these people's hearts? And that's when I also see younger congresswomen like AOC and some of where she's making her mistakes, because she's younger. She needs to be humble. But she has none of that. And I think that will repel the people that she needs to win over. And then that's already happening, right? I mean, she's not very popular in her own party.
Yeah, and in response to that, humility, it is falsely mistaken for powerlessness. If you want a clear example of power being synonymous with humility, look at Jesus the Messiah.
That's powerful. I just got chills, right? And you know what?
Think about it.
Yeah.
All authority
Yeah.
has been given to him on earth and in heaven.
And you know what? I was talking to my boss about this, the guy who owns the place, and he told me the same thing with me. Very similar. He said, listen, because we have these one-on-one check-ins, also something that they do that I love, that I wish
That's
more
necessary.
companies
Yes.
should implement.
Very necessary.
Yeah. And they're talking to me and they're going, hey, I own this place, I'm the top boss, and I know that the guy under me, who's kind of like the COO character, he does everything. my boss comes in like 3 times a week. He's saying, I know that they can do everything better than me. You don't have to do everything the best to be the boss. You just have to what? I don't know. That's what I'm trying to figure out. This guy has it. Because everybody really like loves him, respects him. He's got it. And he's a great leader. But at the same time, he has it set up so that he's not repeating the mistakes that I made with this place. Where I'm in here just doing everything. I don't know how to delegate. I don't know how to be a leader.
But see, the art of supervision includes delegation. I worked with transit from 99 to 2013, 14, something like that. And it was a hierarchy, still a hierarchy company. You have the hourlies, you have a level 1, level supervisor, level 2, then a superintendent, then a general superintendent, and on, and whatever. But when the managers and the superintendents, even the general superintendent, the line superintendent, all this stuff, when they knew I was manning the station, they backed off.
Right.
They clearly understood my message. I don't need the title to be the boss. And I operated accordingly. Somebody would have an accident on the station, I would secure the station first, secure the individual, including taking off belts and using tourniquets and stuff, propping up their head, do that first, and then I notify them second. I probably could have been fired and written up many times, but they knew, she's the boss. So we're gonna let her do what she does. And I operated under that impression. I don't need the title to be the boss.
Okay, this has been amazing as always. I'm looking forward to next week. I got some things to meditate on for the week. And I'll think about those things.
Okay.
And again, I'm already thinking in my head some changes I want to make at work, and some things I want to do differently. Even the way I carry myself, this is, this has been very helpful. So in that anyway,
I'm
so
glad it
I'll
has
see you.
been, because you know me,
week.
I'm very unassuming.
Yeah. Right. But, it's, you just know how to handle yourself. And that's kind of like, I can see you sitting down with anyone in the world and just being like, hey, just, you're very comfortable with yourself at this point in your life. And that's what I want to get to, right?
Yeah.
I want to rely on my own strength. I want to be sure in myself. I want to love myself, and I want to just be authentic with people, be able to be honest with people, have humility, be vulnerable, and all of that, right? All right, thank you so much.
You're welcome. I gave somebody the exercise. She's really having a hard time. And it's